When discussing polarizing comic book creators, one name is always bound to come up. A writer whose work is either seen as an edgy power fantasy for teens, or a poignant exploration of humanity's darkest aspects. His work has been adapted into hit TV shows, and yet he still has a controversial reputation among comic fans. People either hate his work or love it. Very few fall in between. The writer in question is, of course, Garth Ennis. If you've read any of Ennis's books, you'd know why he's such a polarizing figure. His comics are full of violence, obscene humor, and over-the-top social commentary. Furthermore, he doesn't shy away from sharing his personal opinions about comics within his work, which only adds to the division. You see, Garth Ennis has a rather unusual opinion for a comic book writer. He hates superheroes, and this hatred is clearly visible in perhaps his most famous, or most infamous work, The Boys. Each superhero in The Boys is a not-so-subtle reference to characters you already recognize. Homelander mirrors Superman, A-Train parallels The Flash, and Soldier Boy represents Captain America. But instead of being paragons of truth and justice, they're portrayed as egotistical, incompetent, and spoiled celebrities, concerned only with money and power. In typical Ennis fashion, the comic is graphic, obscene, and violent, with him going all in to depict superheroes as disgusting as possible. One of the most common criticisms of The Boys is that it's a needlessly edgy power fantasy. While Ennis definitely lets himself loose in this comic, it's important to remember that he is still a talented writer. After all, he was the mastermind behind the highly acclaimed run of The Punisher and the cult classic Preacher. He knows how to write a compelling story, and The Boys is no exception. Beneath all the gore and violence, there's a compelling narrative about a man driven purely by hate and vengeance. A man whose name you'll probably recognize, Billy Butcher. If you've only seen the show, then you have no idea how absolutely insane the comic version of Billy Butcher is. The show portrays him more as an anti-hero who often goes to extreme lengths to achieve his goals. In the comic, however, he's essentially a villain, a complete sociopath who has little regard for anyone around him, arguably worse than the supes he fights against. In today's video, we'll go over the story of Billy Butcher, his origin, his time with The Boys, and how he ultimately met his end. If you're worried about spoilers for the show, don't be. The show was made so many drastic changes that it's now telling a completely different story. With that out of the way, let's dive into Billy Butcher. Part 1. The Origin. As mentioned in the beginning, Billy Butcher is a violent man, with a hatred of superheroes so deep that it cannot truly be explained in words. But Billy is very much a product of his environment. As seen in the miniseries Butcher, Baker, Candlestick Maker, Billy's childhood was far from perfect. He'd had an abusive father who went to great lengths to instill ideas of violence and tenacity into his children. His father, Samuel Butcher, despite his name, didn't work as a butcher. He was a baker, and a lifelong bully. Every evening he drank, had affairs, and got into pointless bar fights. Out of his two sons, he favored Billy, believing him to be more like himself, while paying little to no attention to his second son, Lenny. But the person who suffered the most in the family was his wife, Carol. She endured daily abuse and constantly lived on edge whenever her husband was around. This constant violence had a profound effect on young Billy. He grew up hating everyone around him and didn't get along with his classmates. He eventually got into a fight and was expelled. While his mother was heartbroken, his father encouraged him, saying that some people deserve a beating and that school is useless anyway. He added that Billy was different from his younger brother, Lenny. He was more like his mother, while Billy was beginning to resemble his dad, which terrified him. While he hated his father, Billy had very fond memories of his mother's side of the family. He especially looked up to his grandfather, a World War II veteran who had lost his arm in the war. Billy saw him as a hero, and once said he wanted to become a soldier like him, to which his grandfather replied that war is a terrible thing that can break even the strongest people. One night, after hearing his dad beating his mother again, Billy decided to act. He grabbed a knife and headed toward their room, but Lenny stopped him. Billy wanted to kill his father, but Lenny convinced him otherwise, saying it would break their mother's heart and tear the family apart. In the end, Billy listened and backed down. In a poetic twist of fate, Samuel later suffered a stroke. While he did survive, his condition worsened over time. Billy decided he needed to step up and support his family. At 16, he followed in his grandfather's footsteps and joined the Marines. A year later, he was deployed to the Falklands War, where he killed someone for the first time. As he continued fighting, he remembered his grandfather's warning, but while his fellow soldiers were shaken and traumatized by the violence, Billy seemed to enjoy it. After the war, however, he struggled to readjust. he quickly got into a fight with another soldier and was discharged. Returning to London, he fell into a lifestyle not unlike his father's, drinking heavily and getting into pointless fights. Everything changed when he met a woman named Becky after another bar fight. The two immediately connected. Becky, a social worker, listened to Billy's story and offered him something he'd never experienced before: compassion. They met again a week later, growing closer. Becky encouraged Billy to stop drinking and control his anger, and surprisingly, he listened. He gave up alcohol and stopped getting into fights. When she later met Billy's family, Lenny noticed that for the first time, Billy seemed at peace. Becky also spoke with Billy's mother and encouraged her to leave her abusive husband and start a new life. Billy nearly relapsed into his old habits when he encountered his father again, who was throwing insults at Becky, but with his girlfriend's support, he managed to restrain himself. The two eventually got married, but tragedy struck soon after. Lenny died in a car accident, and their father didn't even attend the funeral. The loss was devastating, but with Becky's support, Billy endured. They moved into a new home, with Becky continuing her work as a social worker and Billy taking a job in construction. Their relationship wasn't perfect, however, Becky wanted children, but Billy was hesitant, afraid he might pass his trauma on to them. A year into the marriage, they went on a honeymoon in Florida. By coincidence, the most powerful superhero team, the Seven, was visiting the same resort. One night, Billy went out for a walk while Becky stayed behind in their room to read a book. When he returned, her behavior had changed completely. She was distant, cold, and unresponsive. Her condition didn't improve after they returned to England. Billy didn't know what to do and even considered drinking again, but he held himself together for his wife's sake. Then one night, he woke to a horrifying sight. Becky was dead, and in her place was a strange creature with laser eyes. Billy grabbed a nearby lamp and killed it, only to realize that Becky had already been dead. Naturally, Billy was one of the suspects. While in custody, he was approached by a man in a suit who tried to cover up the incident. He offered him a deal to sign a non-disclosure agreement and take all the blame, even adding that, considering Butcher's history, it wouldn't raise any suspicion. In response, Billy asked the man if he was married. When he answered yes, Billy gouged his eyes out, saying that he can now imagine what it feels like to never see his wife again. Following this incident, he was approached by a different man, Greg Mallory. Mallory is a very important character and deserves an explanation. He's a World War II veteran and a high-ranking military official in the United States Army. During the war, his battalion was assisted by a private corporation, Vought American. Vought is a weapons manufacturing company that created military gear of questionable quality. Their most recent invention, however, was very different. They employed Jonah Vogelbaum, a scientist who created the so-called V formula, which grants superpowers, and fled Germany to prevent it from falling into Nazi hands. While he wasn't exactly happy working for Vought either, it was a better option. Vought created their first team, the Avenging Squad, and sent them to the front lines. Among them was the first iteration of Soldier Boy, one of several versions of the character seen in the comics. These superheroes, however, were completely incompetent. They revealed their position to enemy forces, leading to the destruction of Mallory's entire battalion, leaving him as the sole survivor. He was later captured as a prisoner of war, but released after the war ended. Over the years, Mallory watched Vought grow more powerful, with the ultimate goal of integrating superheroes into the military. Their creations became more advanced, culminating in Homelander, the most powerful superhero on Earth, followed by 6 others forming the Seven. Realizing the danger, Mallory began to see them as a threat to national security and joined the CIA to combat Vought. Mallory's biggest breakthrough came when he abducted Vogelbaum, the creator of the V formula. The official story claimed that Vogelbaum took his own life after becoming disillusioned with the superhero business. But in reality, he'd been kidnapped by Mallory. Though he initially intended to kill him, he ultimately couldn't bring himself to kill an old man. Instead, he recruited him. Together, they modified the V formula so that it only granted enhanced strength and endurance. Vogelbaum deliberately made the formula extremely expensive, preventing the government from creating armies of superhumans. Instead, Mallory formed a Black Ops organization dedicated to combating superhuman threats. Knowing he couldn't do it alone, he sought out individuals who had been deeply wronged by Supes, people who couldn't refuse his offer. This brings us back to his meeting with Billy Butcher. To convince Billy, Mallory presented the most important piece of evidence he had uncovered, Becky's diary. He left Billy alone with it, and upon reading it, Billy finally learned what had happened to his wife. That night in Florida, Becky had been sexually assaulted by the most powerful man on Earth. Homelander. The trauma from that event explained her distant and withdrawn behavior. She'd been hesitant to tell Billy, knowing he would seek revenge at any cost. When Mallory returned, Billy was overcome with rage. Mallory explained that incidents like this were common, and that Supes were rarely held accountable. He offered Billy a chance at revenge, warning that if he refused, Becky's death would go unavenged. Mallory then outlined a long-term plan, one that would take years to execute. Billy agreed to join him, forming the foundation of a team that would one day become the Boys. Part 2. Forming the Boys. Billy's first assignment was to murder a group of superheroes in a remote house, which he carried out effortlessly. Impressed by his tenacity, Mallory officially formed a group and gave Butcher samples of the V formula. He initially wanted to name the team Unit X, but Butcher suggested a different name, the Boys. The name actually derives from British slang referring to a gang that dispenses street justice. When you need someone hurt, you send the boys after him. They found an ally in a man known as the Old Legend, a comic book writer who exaggerated the exploits of superheroes. A clear parody of Stan Lee. Disillusioned with Vought, he provided Mallory with valuable information about Supes. For a few years, the team consisted of only 2 operatives, as Mallory preferred a slow and gradual approach. Their early operations were mostly covert, focusing on gathering intel and information, rarely engaging Supes directly. At that time, Billy reunited with his mother, but didn't tell her about his actual line of work. Instead, she believed that Billy worked as a highly in-demand bodyguard. As we later learned, Butcher's mother had remarried and lived a peaceful life, eventually dying of old age. As the duo made steady progress, the boys received more support from the government, and the team expanded. They recruited a man named Mother's Milk, or MM for short. MM is different from Butcher and Mallory. He didn't take the V formula, but still had powers. This is because his mother, while working at a Vought factory, was exposed to Compound V, causing her children to be born with it. MM's brother manifested powers at an early age, which mutated him and ultimately led to his death. Their father tried to fight Vought legally, but eventually died as well due to constant stress and exhaustion. To support his family, MM joined the army, and during a boxing match, his super strength manifested, leading him to accidentally kill his opponent. This is when he was approached by Butcher and Mallory. Recognizing his history with Vought, they recruited him into the Boys. Another member was the Frenchman, who, unlike Mother's Milk, doesn't have a particularly interesting origin or a personal vendetta against Supes. He's simply insane. Apparently, even in France, people called him Frenchie. Last but not least was Kimiko, known in the comic as the Female, a Japanese Supe who was accidentally exposed to large quantities of Compound V. She was the daughter of the secretary working for the Japanese equivalent of Vought. Her mother often took her to work, and one day young Kimiko escaped and accidentally fell into a container filled with Compound V. She gained superpowers, and the scientists locked her up for observation. She eventually escaped, but years of imprisonment took a toll on her. She became mute and largely disconnected from the outside world. The boys sought her out, initially viewing her as a potential weapon, but when they captured her, Mallory objected. Instead, Kimiko was recruited as a full member of the team. Frenchie volunteered to teach her about the outside world, and the two grew especially close, serving as the team's muscle. While the team made steady progress, they had one small loose end: Jonah Vogelbaum. Greg Mallory didn't want anyone to find out that he was alive, and early in the team's history, asked Billy Butcher to kill him, which he did. Their ultimate target, however, was the Seven and its leader, Homelander. Homelander is the most powerful Supe on Earth, as, unlike others, he was injected with Compound V before he was even born. The official story claims he fell to Earth from space and aged into a teenager within weeks. In reality, he was created in a lab in South Dakota and kept chained to a hydrogen bomb for the first 18 years of his life. When he finally appeared in public, he became an overnight sensation. Homelander was Vogelbaum's true magnum opus. However, his creation was extremely expensive, and Vought initially had the resources to create only 6 more powerful superheroes, forming the Seven. The team consisted of Homelander, Black Noir, Queen Maeve, the Deep, Lamplighter, and 2 characters not present in the show, Mr. Marathon and Jack from Jupiter. After Vogelbaum was kidnapped, Vought was unable to replicate his genius, resulting in all subsequent Supes being far less impressive. While the Seven were more powerful than most Supes, they were still untrained and incompetent, which became especially clear when they were dispatched to handle a plane hijacking. Homelander and his team not only failed to rescue the passengers, but actively made the situation worse, accidentally destroying much of the plane. One of the casualties was Mr. Marathon, who was later replaced by another speedster, A-Train. When he grew tired of the mission, Homelander simply left. dooming all the passengers. In the end, the plane crashed into the Brooklyn Bridge, destroying it, killing the passengers as well as countless civilians. One of the team members present, Queen Maeve, was deeply traumatized by the event. She became cold and detached, eventually abandoning heroism altogether. She even went as far as cooperating with the boys and informing them of what truly happened during the mission. In the meantime, the boys acquired their most important leverage yet: photographs from an unknown source depicting Homelander committing obscene acts, which they intended to use against him. Throughout the team's existence, however, there was a clear ideological divide. While Greg Mallory sought to protect national interest, Billy Butcher was driven by hatred and a desire for revenge. Mallory noted that Butcher often took pleasure in killing Supes and showed no sympathy, even when they were children. The tension came to a head when the boys arranged a meeting with the Seven, intending to blackmail them with the information they had gathered. By that point, the team had existed for nearly 15 years, and it was the first time Billy met Homelander face to face. Since they lacked solid evidence linking him to the plane crash, they planned to use the photographs to blackmail Homelander and force a confession. Mallory's primary goal remained the same: to keep Supes out of the military. After hearing them out, Homelander said he would reveal his decision soon, but one of his teammates, Lamplighter, lashed out. Offended at being threatened by people he considered nobodies, he decided to retaliate. After the meeting was over, he followed Mallory, tracked down his hotel room, and, finding him absent, murdered his grandchildren in cold blood. This tragedy forced Mallory to question everything he had done up to that point. Butcher, however, showed little sympathy, saying that Mallory now understood how high the stakes truly were. This led to a violent argument between them. Mallory blamed Butcher for pushing him into the meeting, while Butcher accused Mallory of hypocrisy. Shortly after, they met with the Seven again, and this time Homelander offered something unexpected: a truce. He agreed that Vought would stop pushing for Supes to enter the military and handed over the captured Lamplighter as a peace offering. Mallory accepted the deal and later executed Lamplighter, but it brought him no peace. His grandchildren were dead, and his daughter blamed him, cutting him out of her life entirely. Following this, Mallory left the boys for good as the CIA withdrew its support. When he informed Butcher of this decision, another argument broke out. Billy realized that Mallory had never truly cared about justice for his wife and had only used him as a tool. He warned Mallory to stay away from the team, and the two parted ways, seemingly for good. Butcher concluded that if anything was going to be done, he would have to do it himself. Despite the team's disbandment, he maintained some connections within the CIA, and it was only a matter of time before the boys would reform. This time, however, Billy intended to recruit someone new to replace Mallory. Part 3. Recruiting Huey Campbell. A few years after the Lamplighter incident, Billy Butcher begins reforming the boys, but he needs a new recruit to replace Greg Mallory. He finds that replacement in a man named Huey Campbell. Huey is by all means a regular person from Scotland. Unlike the rest of them, he has no military training or vengeful spirit. His life, however, changes forever after an incident involving another superhero, A-Train. While Huey is on a date with his girlfriend Robin, a costumed supervillain is knocked toward them. The impact kills Robin instantly. The person responsible is A-Train, a speedster chasing the villain across the Atlantic with little regard for collateral damage. He shows no remorse and immediately flees the scene. Huey is left completely devastated. Shortly after, he's approached by men in suits who ask him not to pursue legal action, offering him a payout in return. Huey accepts, clearly shaken and not thinking straight. He becomes depressed and withdrawn. But one day, while visiting a local park, he's approached by Billy Butcher. Billy has learned about the incident through government files and, believing Huey could be useful, arranges a meeting. He explains that incidents like this are common, and that he once led a CIA-backed group that held superheroes accountable. He offers Huey a place on the team, but Huey hesitates, saying he doesn't have it in him to join a Black Ops operation. At that point, Butcher reveals that A-Train laughed and joked about the incident. With the help of Queen Maeve, the boys had bugged the Seven's headquarters and recorded their conversations. He gives Huey an envelope containing cash and tells him to fly to New York and contact him if he makes a decision. This is where Butcher comes full circle. Just as Mallory once manipulated him using the death of his wife, Billy now uses the same tactic on Huey. Some might ask why Butcher would recruit an ordinary person with no combat experience, but near the end of the story, it becomes clear that Huey was a deliberate choice. Huey accepts the offer and travels to New York. He settles in the South Bronx, unaware that it is a dangerous neighborhood, and contacts Butcher. He's officially recruited into the boys and meets the rest of the team: Mother's Milk, Frenchie, and the female. They operate out of the Flatiron, using it as their base of operations. Huey's first mission is to spy on the superhero team Teenage Kicks, a parody of the Teen Titans. During the mission, Butcher does one of the worst things to Huey. He injects him with the V formula without his consent. Butcher defends his actions, saying Huey will need it to fight Supes, but Huey is understandably outraged. He quits the team and returns to his hotel, reconsidering his decision. The next day, however, he meets Annie January, also known as Starlight. Annie has recently joined the Seven, but quickly realizes that being a superhero is not what she expected. Her teammates mistreat and bully her, and she, like Huey, begins to question her choices. The two bond over their struggles, unaware of each other's true identities. After this, Huey reconsiders and returns to Butcher and the team. Billy apologizes for what he did, promising no more surprises. They continue spying on Teenage Kicks, which eventually leads to the team launching a direct assault on the boys. Since all members now have powers, they manage to hold their ground, but during the fight, Huey accidentally kills one of the Supes, unable to control his new strength. Even Butcher admits that killing them was not a part of the plan. A public funeral follows, filled with fake grief and exaggerated stories of the hero's exploits. Homelander begins to suspect that something is wrong, believing the boys might be back. After the incident, Huey decides to quit once again. He tells Butcher that he's shaken by what happened and cannot remain in a place where such things occur. In response, Butcher manipulates him once more. He shares his own story about the death of his wife and how the most powerful superhero in the world was responsible. He argues that superheroes get away with countless crimes, and that his team, while flawed, is necessary. Without them, no one would hold Supes accountable. Finally, he tells Huey that he always wanted a little brother. After this conversation, Huey stays with the team until the end. To keep the video concise, we won't be going over every single issue of the comic, instead focusing on the most important plot points. Throughout the entire story, Billy Butcher pushes Huey to be more violent, confrontational, and daring, but Huey is always hesitant. Despite hating Supes, Huey has compassion for them, recognizing that the world is not black and white. The boys go on a mission to Russia, where Huey meets and befriends Vasily, a superhero known as Love Sausage, who, unlike his show counterpart, is one of the few Supes who is genuinely a decent person. During that mission, they also come across James Stillwell, a Vought executive and the true main villain of the series. Interestingly, he's absent from the show. Traces of his character were instead passed to Madeline Stillwell and Stan Edgar. Huey then meets the Legend, who briefs him on Vought's history and how the Supes were created. One of the most important storylines involves the G-Men, the boys' parody of the X-Men. Huey dresses up as a superhero and infiltrates the team, and while his teammates are gross, he realizes that at the end of the day, most Supes are just kids who are misguided into seeking fame and fortune. Unlike Butcher, who's driven by blind hatred and revenge, Huey recognizes the complexity of the war he's fighting. The team then goes after Payback, the parody of the Avengers. But soon after completing that mission, Butcher discovers something unexpected. He randomly comes across Huey on the street and sees that he's dating Annie January, a Supe. Apparently, even after dating her for months, he didn't know that she was a superhero, and Starlight didn't know that he was a member of the boys either. Butcher begins to suspect that Huey was a planted asset by Vought and decides to act. He sends Huey on a mission to spy on Super Duper, the weakest superhero team in the world. Huey agrees and discovers that the Super Dupers are not evil at all. While their powers are terrible, they still try to help around the neighborhood. They're genuinely a friendly group with a strong bond. Recently, however, they were joined by Malchemical, a powerful Supe who isn't much different from a typical superhero in this universe. Huey actually befriends the team and even stands up to Malchemical when they're bullied. One day, however, Malchemical goes too far. He has the power to change into various states of matter, and using it, he torments his teammates by transforming into objects they fear the most. Huey intervenes, but is no match. Malchemical easily overwhelms him and then sets out to kill him. Butcher, observing everything, intervenes, and when Malchemical turns into gas, lights him on fire, killing him. He then turns his attention to Super Duper, but Huey stops him. He begs Butcher not to hurt them, with Billy saying that they're Supes and should not be shown compassion. As Huey continues insisting, Butcher remembers his earlier words when he recruited Huey, about how he wanted a younger brother. The two leave and return to New York. Huey reunites with Starlight and finally explains what happened to his ex-girlfriend Robin. She was killed by a Supe. Upon hearing this, Starlight is shaken and decides to reveal the truth. She's a superhero as well. Upon hearing this, Huey is shocked. He gets flashbacks of all the superheroes he encountered during his time with the boys and runs, telling Starlight to stay away. He later meets with Butcher, who, in his typical fashion, continues to manipulate him. He says that from now on, they're not only co-workers, but good friends. And if Huey's going through something, he's willing to listen. Huey reveals that the girl he's been dating turned out to be a Supe. At first, he's scared of Butcher, but Billy continues talking as if nothing is wrong, extracting as much information as possible about Starlight. Later that day, Butcher commits one of his lowest actions yet. He shows Huey a tape of Starlight's first day with the Seven without explaining that she was a victim of sexual assault. Butcher successfully sabotages their relationship, and Huey breaks up with Annie, unwilling to even hear her out. To clear his head, Huey returns to Scotland, where he has a separate adventure, but discovers that he's visited by Starlight. This time, however, she stands her ground. She scolds Huey for being inconsiderate and not even asking her about the incident. As she continues confronting him, Huey breaks down, admits his mistake, and apologizes, saying that he behaved like a jerk and shouldn't have given in to Butcher's manipulation. The two reconcile and return to America, but Starlight is hesitant to rekindle their relationship. She believes that, at least for the time being, they should remain apart. Huey returns to the boys, not knowing that they're about to embark on their most important mission yet. Part 4. The Death of Homelander. While all of this is happening, Homelander has been experiencing changes. Feeling manipulated by Vought, Billy Butcher, and the rest, he becomes more and more frustrated. What disturbs him most are the pictures Butcher acquired, depicting him engaging in acts so heinous that they cannot be showed on YouTube. Strangely, Homelander doesn't even remember committing any of these acts, which causes him to question his sanity. He begins experiencing nervous breakdowns and starts talking to himself in the mirror. His behavior puts all of his teammates on edge, fearing his mere presence. Eventually, tired of being Vaught's lapdog, he decides to act. Homelander assembles several superheroes and sets out to overthrow the government. Meanwhile, the boys acquire even more pictures, this time depicting Jack from Jupiter, suggesting he may have committed murder. Somehow, this information goes public, even though the boys didn't release it. The Seven arrange another meeting to discuss the situation, and when the boys deny responsibility, Homelander senses that they're telling the truth. Jack lashes out, demanding compensation and swearing revenge. When the boys return to their base, they discover that Butcher's dog Terror has been killed. He immediately assumes Jack is responsible and sets out for revenge. He tracks Jack down and ambushes him. In one of the most violent scenes in the comic, Butcher kills Jack while repeatedly asking, "Why did you kill my dog, Jack?" Strangely, he also insists that it isn't there and that he's somewhere else, watching everything happen. As we later learn, Jack wasn't actually responsible for killing Terror. In the next issue, Homelander's larger plan begins to unfold. He keeps some of his teammates in the dark and sends a low-level superhero team to distract the boys. Before the fight, Huey and Butcher have another conversation, where Huey declares that he's done with violence. He's willing to assist with investigations and surveillance, but refuses to engage in direct combat. Before they can continue, the team sent by Homelander arrives. The boys deal with them easily, but assuming they were sent by Vought, Frenchie and Kimiko launch a counterattack. Homelander's plan works, the boys are distracted. While Frenchie and Kimiko are occupied, Butcher takes Huey to the roof. There, he reveals that he's captured A-Train and presents him as an opportunity for revenge. To further manipulate Huey, Butcher plays a recording in which A-Train discusses the incident that killed Robin. He casually admits to killing someone and is reassured by his teammates that he did the right thing by leaving immediately. They laugh about similar incidents without remorse. This fills Huey with rage. As A-Train begs for his life, Huey tells him that the person he killed was named Robin, that she was a human being. A-Train offers insincere apologies, which enrages Huey even more. Butcher insists that words are not enough and pressures Huey to act. When Huey hesitates, Butcher plays another part of the recording, this time revealing how the Seven deliberately chose Starlight as the member so she could be bullied and humiliated. This becomes the breaking point. Huey loses control and kills A-Train with his super strength. Meanwhile, Homelander continues his plan. He confronts Starlight and Queen Maeve. Annie is in the process of leaving the Seven for good, but Homelander arrives. Recognizing the danger, Maeve throws Starlight away to safety and confronts him alone. She, however, is not strong enough and sacrifices herself to save Annie's life. Butcher then receives a call from James Stillwell, who informs him of Homelander's plan. Realizing what's about to happen, Butcher heads to Washington, telling Huey that he had his turn, and now it's his time. Before heading toward Washington, Homelander confronts Stillwell and attempts to kill him. Despite the threat, Stillwell remains calm, with Homelander even calling him an actual superhuman. He calls Homelander a spoiled child desperate for approval, which enrages him. Homelander ultimately spares him, telling him to watch events unfold. As Huey and Butcher arrive in Washington, they find the White House surrounded by supes. With the military preparing a response outside, Butcher grabs a crowbar and enters alone. unaware that he's about to face someone he never expected. At the same time, uncovers something shocking about Black Noir. He contacts Huey, warning him that Butcher may be in grave danger. Upon entering the Oval Office, Billy Butcher saw Homelander and the dead body of President Newman. Butcher admitted that he was impressed, to which Homelander lashed out, saying that he doesn't seek to impress anyone. Homelander insisted that he overthrew the government simply because he could. As the conversation continued, Butcher's wife was brought up, but Homelander insisted that he didn't remember her at all. In fact, he didn't remember anything about the pictures Butcher had acquired either, as if there were gaps in his memory. As Butcher prepared to strike, Homelander laughed, but suddenly a third party entered the room. It was Black Noir. As had uncovered, Black Noir was different from all other supes. He was specifically created as a failsafe against Homelander, designed to be slightly stronger so that Homelander could be taken out if necessary. But when Homelander obeyed Vought, Black Noir was left without a purpose. Since his only goal was to eliminate Homelander, he slowly began to lose his sanity as he was never allowed to fulfill his mission. This led him to commit heinous crimes in Homelander's name, attempting to provoke him into making a move against Vought, which ultimately worked. All the terrible things Homelander was accused of were actually done by Black Noir, and he was the one who sent the pictures to the boys. Realizing he had been manipulated his entire life, Homelander attacked. The two superhumans clashed, and Butcher fled the White House. Meanwhile, the rest of the supes were taken out by the military, who possessed anti-supe missiles that Butcher had uncovered during his mission in Russia. Eventually, only Black Noir remained standing. He emerged from the White House, dismembered, carrying Homelander's corpse in his arm. Butcher armed himself with a machine gun and, along the soldiers, unleashed a barrage of bullets, leaving Noir barely alive. Butcher then grabbed a crowbar and finished him off. Butcher had finally taken his revenge, but it brought him no peace. Huey tried to comfort him, but Billy asked to be left alone. He looked up at the sky and called out Becky's name, apologizing. He admitted that this was not what she would have wanted, and that she would hate what he had done with his life, but most of all, she would hate what he was about to do next. Part 5. The Death of Billy Butcher. Following this entire conflict, the team began to slowly dissolve. Each member felt that they had fulfilled their role and was ready to quit. Wanted to take care of his family, Frenchie and Kimiko sought a new, peaceful life somewhere far away, and Huey was tired of all the violence. He was especially shaken by killing A-Train, saying that he hated every moment of it. When Butcher returned to the base, he gave each member a few months off, but added that when the team reunited, Huey would be second in command. Butcher said that Huey always sought leadership and command, which caused the other teammates to look at him with distrust. As we later learn, Butcher created division within the team on purpose, as he was preparing for his ultimate mission to kill all supes. Earlier, he went to Russia, where he killed his friend Love Sausage. His goal was to create a supe-killing virus using the same technology he had previously shared with the military. He had also murdered Greg Mallory after Mallory contacted Huey following his return from Scotland. He then went after the legend and killed him as well. Unbeknown to Butcher, before his death, Love Sausage sent a message to Huey. It contained a link revealing Butcher's plan. Huey reassembled the boys and informed them about everything. Through their CIA contacts, they learned how Butcher intended to use the virus. The problem wasn't that Billy wasn't a chemist, he had to be working with someone. That person was Jonah Vogelbaum. Remember that Butcher was supposed to have killed Vogelbaum years earlier, yet Mallory had never actually seen the body? There was a strong possibility that Vogelbaum was still alive and secretly assisting him. The team realized that Butcher might actually succeed in unleashing the virus. The biggest issue was that it would kill not only supes, but also anyone who had ever been exposed to Compound V, even in the slightest, meaning millions of innocent people would die, regardless if they had superpowers or not. As the team planned their next move, Kimiko raised her hand. Frenchie explained that she had made significant progress since their last battle and hadn't hurt anyone since. She wanted to quit, and the team agreed. But just as they were about to leave, Kimiko spoke for the first time. She said that she hated mean people and chose to stay, joining the mission. While the rest of the team set out to investigate, stayed behind at the base. Later that day, Butcher arrived as well. Asked if he was truly going through with his plan, to which Billy admitted that he had expected to die at the White House, but since he survived, he felt compelled to continue. A fight broke out with initially overpowering him. Shouted that he didn't want to do this, and Butcher replied that he knew, adding that had always been his best mate. This distracted and gave Butcher an opening. He grabbed a grenade and detonated it in his face, killing him. Huey continued the investigation, tracking down Vogelbaum's possible location, while Frenchie and Kimiko cleaned up the aftermath, with Kimiko especially enraged by death. Frenchie warned Huey that the CIA wouldn't help them as the boys were always meant to be deniable, and if this situation became public, they would all become fugitives. The team realized they would have to deal with Butcher on their own. Huey traveled to a house in Vermont where he found Vogelbaum dead. He received a call from Butcher, who attempted to justify his actions, claiming that soups were a stain on society that needed to be eradicated. Huey searched the lab only to find it empty. Back at Flatiron, Frenchie was updated on the situation and was left alone with Kimiko after the cleanup crew departed. They shared a poignant moment, with Frenchie asking if he had helped her adjust to normal life, recalling how he was the only one who treated her as human when they first met. Suddenly, they heard a beeping sound. Frenchie discovered a bomb left behind by Butcher. Moments before it detonated, he turned to Kimiko and confessed that he had always loved her. The explosion destroyed the entire building, killing them both. Huey, who was outside, witnessed the destruction. As he was knocked out, he remembered his earlier conversations with Butcher. At that moment, Huey realized that he was the only one who could stop him. Returning to his apartment, Huey considered his next move. He had been completely terrified of Butcher throughout his entire time with the boys, and now he stood completely alone. Huey even drank Mother's Milk's mother's milk to grow stronger, but he still wasn't brave enough to face Butcher by himself. He decided to contact the CIA, but the operative immediately asked why Butcher was at the Empire State Building. Apparently, every time one of the boys used their IDs, the CIA was notified, and Butcher had used his 20 minutes earlier. Huey realized that he was about to unleash the virus and that time was running out. With no other choice, he set out to confront the person he feared the most. Using his CIA credentials, he was allowed to enter the building, and on the top floor, he found Billy Butcher. Billy once again defended his actions, saying that he had been planning this for years, but Huey called him insane. Butcher then explained that whenever he felt like he couldn't control himself, he imagined being somewhere else, watching everything happen from a distance. Huey called him a villain, but Butcher taunted him, saying that even after everything, Huey still feared him and couldn't even say his name. This provoked Huey to act. He charged toward Butcher but missed, crashing into the window instead. The glass shattered, Butcher grabbed him, and Huey apologized, which made Butcher laugh. Suddenly, the structure holding Butcher gave way as well, and they both fell. They landed on a balcony, Huey injured his leg, and Butcher's lower body was completely paralyzed. With no way to continue fighting, they were finally able to talk. Huey immediately asked him, "How could you?" Butcher continued to defend his actions, saying that soups must be dealt with, but Huey was talking about something else. He asked why Butcher had killed his former teammates who had fought alongside him for so many years. Billy confessed that he had originally planned to remove Huey from the situation entirely so that he would know nothing. He knew his teammates would oppose the plan, so he eliminated them first, even though he didn't want to. He admitted that he had taken a life for the first time at 17, and once again explained that whenever he did something terrible, he imagined himself somewhere else, theorizing that he might be a psychopath. Huey asked if his role had been to talk Butcher out of doing something terrible, similar to how his younger brother Lenny had once stopped him from killing their father. Billy admitted that he hadn't recruited Huey for that specific purpose, but the idea had been in the back of his mind ever since they met. Huey reminded him of Lenny, saying that despite Butcher constantly pushing him to be more violent, angry, and confrontational, Huey had retained his morality and never stooped as low as Butcher. They remembered the killing of A-Train and how shaken and hesitant Huey had been. Huey's genuine goodness, and the fact that he reminded Butcher of Lenny, was the reason Billy had saved him earlier. Despite this, Butcher still defended his actions, saying that the world needed people like him. Huey then brought up Becca, asking if he had done everything for the memory of one woman. Butcher replied that Huey had never met her and had no idea of the impact she had on his life. He then asked Huey if he still loved Starlight, and when Huey answered yes, Butcher urged him never to let go of that relationship and not to make the same mistake he did. He recalled that Becca once told him that men without women are just boys, and that it was a dangerous path. At that moment, the police arrived. Not wanting to go to prison, Butcher asked Huey to kill him, but he hesitated. Billy then manipulated Huey one last time, claiming that he had gone to Scotland and killed both of his parents. This caused Huey to lash out and kill Butcher by delivering a final blow to his heart. With a smile on his face, Butcher accepted his death. Huey then called his parents, only to realize that they were alive and well, and that Butcher had lied. The comic then cuts to 6 months later. We see Huey continuing the fight, but in his own way. He now targets Vought directly rather than going after individual soups. He blackmails Stillwell using a soup virus, and even forces him to finance the rebuilding of the Flatiron building. Stillwell, however, does not seem particularly upset, saying that corporations will always find a way to profit. Huey later reunites with Starlight, and as they reminisce about his teammates, he tells her that there will never be anyone like them again. As a final goodbye, Huey walks across the newly reconstructed Brooklyn Bridge, leaving a small mark honoring his fallen teammates, Frenchie, MM, and Kimiko. This is where The Boys comic ends. While often edgy, needlessly obscene, and violent, The Boys delivers an important story about the dangers of hatred and revenge. Billy Butcher serves as an interesting case study of how far some are willing to go to exact vengeance. This show has definitely toned down his character compared to his comic counterpart. Despite this, fans have theorized that even the show version of Butcher might be willing to kill his teammates to achieve his goal, but only time will tell. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like it. Don't forget to check out other videos covering various comics such as Invincible and Vertigo. Thank you for watching, and see you in a future upload.